So the reason I showed you that is because it's part of my past, but also because the story I'm going to read is it's from around the same time as when I was in college and I played baseball. And then I went up to visit my dad for a trip that, well, I'll just read it. But I also want to say that I think about my dad a lot. He passed away 7 years ago, but he passed away in February, so it's February, so now I'm always thinking of it. So, but he actually helped me write this story, because when I started to write it for Salon, I couldn't remember some details, like, you know, names and places, and so he actually was on instant message at the time, and he would like send me suggestions for the story. And in one instance, there's a guy that has a dentally challenged state, and he provided the actual description of the guy, and so I'll just go ahead and read it. This is called Misty and Meat Pies. I remember myself at the time as gangly and dim. I was 18, just removed from my first year of college, during which time I played baseball, ate buffalo wings, drank beer, whispered lies to young women, and slept. School? Let me put it this way. I got a U as an unsatisfactory in Typing 101, and the rest of my grades added up to academic probation, which is the university's way of saying, yep, this guy is dim. So on the flight to Monroe, Louisiana, where I'd visit my dad for 3 weeks, I was filled with a sense of freedom. It was my chance to escape my life for a spell. What I had, a retreat from school, a comfortable suburban life, and a girlfriend I didn't really like anymore, was creative enough punishment. But Dad saw to it that I'd spend my time steam cleaning case machines at his tractor company for 8 hours a day at minimum wage, and not so subtle-handed, if I kept up my study practices, minimum wage is exactly what I'd be earning for the rest of my life. In other words, the visit was a way to purge myself of my failures and realize my potential. Of course, being dim, I had only a vague understanding of all this. Monroe and its smaller twin city, West Monroe, are split by the Washita River, lying a couple hundred miles northwest of New Orleans in a flatbed portion of the state. In design, Monroe is a prototypic small southern town, a centralized downtown with a few skyscrapers hovering over early 20th century homes. Delta Airlines was founded there. Agriculture is a big industry, and the University of Louisiana at Monroe adds academic appeal. There's a paper mill a few miles outside town that in the spring competes with the scent of magnolias. It was hot that May, and the fawning oaks and the crawfish clay absorbed the sun and held it like a brick oven. My first day of work, Dad woke me at 6 a.m. by pulling open my left eyelid and shining a flashlight into my brain. Clearly I wasn't in college anymore. I dressed in official company attire, a green jumpsuit with my name stitched on it. I grabbed a quick breakfast, hopped in my temporary transportation, a red CJ5 Jeep, modified with a Ford V8 engine and fat tires, which made it much like the early rockets that blew up on NASA launch pads. And I drove to work. Dad's tractor company was located on an industrial road on the outskirts of town. Before I knew it, I was standing on a cement platform in the tractor yard out back, the early morning sun already stinging the back of my neck. Before me, stretching out like the skeleton of a stegosaurus, was a muddy backhoe. JT, one of my dad's workers, was standing next to me. He had a thick brown beard and no teeth, giving his mouth the appearance of, among other things, a pink cave surrounded by fire-blackened scrub brush. His dentally challenged state, coupled with a thick-as-molasses southern accent, made him impossible to understand as he explained to me how to steam clean a tractor. He walked off. I stood there a moment, holding the steam gun in my hand, eyeing the caked backhoe. Then I blasted the tractor for a good 10 seconds. A trickle of mud ran to a nearby drain. The tractor was still covered in the mud, crawfish mud, which smells like rotten eggs when it gets wet. It was like cement. I blasted again and felt the rifle start to heat in my hands. I was realizing why. In fact, it's called steam cleaning. Mud began to splatter in chunks and brown spray. It got hotter. Every once in a while, I stuck my head under a nearby water spigot to cool off. At lunchtime, Dad came out to check on me. "Jesus," he said at the side of me, "you're covered in mud." I looked at myself. He was right. You know, you don't have to stand so close when you're cleaning them, he said. Oh yeah, I said. You want to eat lunch? Can I? I felt like I was in prison. Yeah, we'll let you. Southern folks have a way of recognizing the potential of a good story while it's still happening. I discovered this when I walked into the tractor company lunchroom. My name was Mud, and you could hear the whoops and hollers all the way to downtown Monroe. My dad, to his credit, took pity on me. After work and a cool shower, I came out to the kitchen of his old southern cottage. His house always smelled like someone was roasting garlic somewhere, and the double-hung windows were open to let in the dusky air. He sat me down at the dinner table. He had something he wanted me to try. He always had food he wanted me to try. Baba ganoush, or crawfish etouffee, or chicken sauce piquant. Just the type of fare that fans of buffalo wings tend to avoid. This time it looked like a miniature half football steaming on a small plate. A bottle of Tabasco sat next to it. What is it? I asked. Try it, he said, handing me a freshly poured icy beer. I did. It was some kind of crescent-shaped pastry filled with a spicy meat concoction and deep fried. It tasted of green onions and garlic and seasoning that mingled like friends at a spring picnic. It's called a Natchitoches meat pie, Dad said. They're made in this small town a few hours from here. I didn't really care. It could have been filled with rat livers and I wouldn't have cared. It tasted good and I was hungry after working all day in the sun. I added Tabasco and scarfed it down, drank my beer, asked for more. That night before bed, I had another pie. The next morning, after Dad woke me with a squirt gun, I had one for breakfast and packed 2 for lunch, along with a Coke. It seems Dad had a never-ending supply of meat pies in his freezer. My time in Monroe quickly fell into rhythm. I'd rise early to avoid Dad's practical jokes, pack my lunch, jump in the rocket, head to work. I'd steam clean until lunch, eat meat pies, while struggling through a conversation with JT, steam clean until 5, rocket home, eat more pies, fall asleep early. I was getting better at the job too, perfecting a way to spray the tractors without dirtying my entire person. It's all in the angle of the steam gun. Manual labor isn't bad for the imaginative mind. There's something mesmerizing about standing in the same place for hours, sweating, watching hot water run off steel and earth. It's the fodder for daydreams, and contrary to my dad's efforts to persuade me to enjoy school, I was cultivating a fantasy of me as blue-collar guy. I was reinventing myself into a life away from classes that make you type to classical music. Forget professional baseball or whatever else it was that I thought I might get out of college. To me, steam cleaning wasn't a bad life. It was simple and relaxing. Sometime near the end of the first week, Dad took me to his friend's house. As with new foods, he was always introducing me to people. The pilot, the knife guy, the hunter. Now it was Neil and Doll's turn. A middle-aged couple pulled straight from a southern play. As I remember, Neil resembled Robert Conrad in the face. He was a scratch golfer who often practiced his golf swing in the middle of a conversation. He had Popeye forearms and a torso not unlike an upside-down pyramid. Doll, meantime, looked her name. Porcelain skin, frumpy dress, sad eyes. We said hello and made small talk as we all stood in the kitchen. Doll offered me sweet tea, and though she smiled, her eyes were still sad. It occurred to me that I was being interviewed. They wanted to know what I was studying at school. The usual. What being a baseball player was like. Cool. A young girl walked in. She was maybe 13, Neil and Doll's daughter. She looked at me as if she knew a secret, and then turned to her mom. When's Misty getting home? She asked. She has class. She'll be home shortly. They were both smiling at me. Misty goes to the university, Dad said, and I couldn't help but notice the odd look on his face. Was this a setup of some kind? No kidding, I said. I once had a cat named Misty.